So good morning friends. In the previous class, we had completed the executive powers of President of India. Alright. In the previous class, we have discussed executive powers of President. We even discussed some of the legislative powers of President of India. That is, we have completed the executive powers and we have discussed some of the legislative powers of President of India. Alright. The last point of discussion was it is veto powers of President of India. It is veto powers of President of India. It is veto powers of President of India. Okay. That is, we have discussed the suspensive veto powers. We have discussed suspensive veto powers, pocket veto powers and absolute veto power. Alright. So we have completed all the veto powers of President of India. Alright. So one thing we should remember, that is the veto powers of President. They are not only against the bills passed by Parliament, but also President of India can utilize can use these veto powers. Even against the bills which are reserved for his consideration by governor. That means President can use the veto powers even against state bills. Alright, even against state bills. That is, those bills which are reserved for President consideration. That is under Article 201. Alright. So President of India can use his veto powers. President of India can use the veto powers even against the state bills which are reserved for his consideration. Under Article 201. Alright. So this is what you should remember. So this was the topic, right? These are the topics that we have discussed in the previous class. Alright. So going ahead, alright, with the other legislative powers of President of India. So the most important, that is ordinance making power of President of India, which is mentioned in Article 123 of Constitution. So Article 123 of Constitution deals with the ordinance making power of President of India. Alright. Article 123 deals with the ordinance making power of President of India. Alright. So already I have mentioned this, right? I have mentioned regarding ordinance making power in 1861 Act, the Indian Councils Act of 1861. Alright. So once again, let me explain this ordinance making power of President of India. Alright. So if you take this ordinance making power of President, which is mentioned in Article 123. So if you take this ordinance making power, alright, which is mentioned in Article 123. Alright, the primary condition for issuing the ordinance is when no House of Parliament is in session. That is, when neither House of Parliament is in session. In such a condition, the President of India can issue the ordinance. The first condition is when neither House of Parliament is in session. That is, when no House of Parliament is in session, then only then the President of India can issue the ordinance. That means what? If a House of Parliament is in session, either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, whenever a House of Parliament is in session, then in such condition the President is not allowed. The President is not allowed to issue the ordinance. The President cannot issue the ordinance when Parliament is in session. Alright? So this is what you should remember. అంటే ఏ హౌస్ అయినా సరే, అది లోక్సభ కావచ్చు, రాజ్యసభ కావచ్చు, when one of the House of Parliament is in session, in such a condition, the President of India cannot issue the ordinance. The first condition is when neither House of Parliament is in session, the President of India can issue the ordinance. Alright, this is one thing. Now, first of all, what do you mean by ordinance? Ordinance అంటే ఏంటిది? What do you mean by ordinance? If you take this ordinance means a law that is issued by executive, the law that is made by Parliament, President of India, a law that is issued by President of India, which has same force and same effect. Right? A law of Parliament, right? A law of Parliament which has same force and same effect as that of law of legislature. So simply ordinance means it is a law that is made by President which has same force and same effect as that of law of legislature. అంటే పార్లమెంట్ చేసిన లాకి ఎంత పవర్ ఉంటుందో, రైట్, అంతే పవర్ ప్రెసిడెంట్ ఇష్యూ చేసిన ఆర్డినెన్స్కి ఉంటుంది. సో ఆర్డినెన్స్ హ్యాస్ సేమ్ పవర్ యాజ్ దట్ ఆఫ్ లా ఆఫ్ లెజిస్లేచర్. అండ్ ఇన్ ఫ్యాక్ట్ we can see ordinance as a substitute of law of parliament, right? Because when the parliament is not in session, this ordinance is issued. That means the ordinance that is issued has same force as law of legislature. So we can call it as substitute. So parliament session lo ledu kabatti, రైట్, ఆర్డినెన్స్ అనేది ఇష్యూ చేయడం జరుగుతుంది. అంటే అర్థం ఏంటిది? ఒక లా ఆఫ్ పార్లమెంట్కి ఎంత ఎఫెక్ట్ ఉంటుందో, ఎంత ఫోర్స్ ఉంటుందో అంతే ఎఫెక్ట్ ఆర్డినెన్స్కి ఉంటుంది. ఇది బాగా గుర్తుపెట్టుకోండి, రైట్. సో దిస్ ఆర్డినెన్స్ ఈజ్ ఇష్యూడ్ రైట్ వెన్ పార్లమెంట్ ఈజ్ నాట్ ఇన్ సెషన్, రైట్. అండ్ దిస్ ఆర్డినెన్స్ ఈజ్ ఇష్యూడ్ వెన్ దేర్ ఈజ్ a demanding situation, when there is a compelling situation, a situation that requires a law of parliament, any situation which requires immediate law of parliament, right. And when there is no time for the president to convene the session of parliament, in such condition the ordinance is issued, right. So when there is a compelling situation which requires immediate law of parliament, right, all right. So it is in that situation, it is in that situation this ordinance is issued, right? So the reason for issuing the ordinance, the condition for issuing the ordinance is a situation that requires urgent law of parliament, right? So these are two conditions, and president can issue the ordinance only if he is satisfied about these situations, right? So upon the satisfaction of president of India, ఎప్పుడైతే ప్రెసిడెంట్ నిజంగానే అవసరం ఉన్నది అనుకున్నప్పుడు మాత్రమే ఆర్డినెన్స్ అనేది ఇష్యూ అవుతుంది. అఫ్ కోర్స్, రైట్, ఇట్ ఈస్ డన్ ఆన్ ద అడ్వైస్ ఆఫ్ ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్, బట్ స్టిల్ అపాన్ ది సాటిస్ఫాక్టరీ గ్రౌండ్స్, అపాన్ ది సాటిస్ఫాక్టరీ conditions. So President of India can issue the ordinance only when there are satisfactory grounds or satisfactory conditions, right? So it is then these ordinances are issued by president, right? So remember this point. Alright, so next, the ordinance issued by President of India. The ordinance issued by President of India. The ordinance issued by President of India will be in force for a period of 6 months. Right? Normally, the validity of an ordinance. The validity of an ordinance issued by President of India is 6 months. Alright, 6 months, or till the parliament comes into session. So normally the life of an ordinance is 6 months. Alright, and this ordinance will be in effect, or it will be in force till the parliament comes into session. And there is a condition. Right, this ordinance should be tabled in the house of the parliament as soon as the parliament comes into session. So not only the ordinance but also the conditions which compel the President of India to issue the ordinance. And అర్థమేంటిది, ordinance తో పాటు right, even the conditions, right, which have compelled the President of India to issue the ordinance. So both should be tabled in the house, right? So both the ordinance and the conditions, both the ordinance as well as the conditions which have made it mandatory, which have compelled the President of India to issue the ordinance, both should be tabled in the house. Alright, so, and this ordinance should be passed, right, should be discussed and passed within a period of 6 weeks of its assembly. అంటే పార్లమెంట్ సెషన్లోకి రాగానే ఆర్డినెన్స్తో పాటు కండిషన్స్ ఇవన్నీ కూడా హౌస్లో ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేసి, రైట్, 6 వారాల్లోపు రైట్ పాస్ చేయాలి. రైట్, ఒకవేళ పాస్ చేయలేదనుకోండి, ఇలాంటి ఆర్డినెన్స్కి, అలా పాస్ చేయని ఆర్డినెన్స్కి ఎలాంటి వ్యాలిడిటీ ఉండదు. రైట్, సో 6 వారాల తర్వాత ఆ ఆర్డినెన్స్కి ఎలాంటి వ్యాలిడిటీ ఉండదు. రైట్, సో ఇది మనం గుర్తుపెట్టుకోవాల్సింది. రైట్, సో ది ఆర్డినెన్స్ along with the conditions should be tabled in the house as soon as possible, as soon as house comes into session, and this ordinance should be discussed and passed within a period of 6 weeks. Right, within a period of 6 weeks. That means after the expiry of 6 weeks, this ordinance will not have any effect. This ordinance will cease to have an effect. అర్థమవుతుందా? సో 6 వారాల లోపు దాన్ని పాస్ చేయకపోతే ఆర్డినెన్స్కి ఎలాంటి ఎఫెక్ట్ ఉండదు. ది ఆర్డినెన్స్ will not have effect after the expiry of 6 weeks. Alright, so this is what you should remember. Alright, that means Discussion and debates in the parliament is essential to to make this ordinance a law. So if ordinance is passed in the parliament, right, if at all the ordinance is passed in the parliament, this ordinance becomes a law of parliament. It becomes a law of parliament. Before passing in the parliament, it is called as ordinance. But after passing in parliament, this ordinance becomes a law. గుర్తుపెట్టుకోండి, పాస్ కానంత వరకు ఆర్డినెన్స్, పాస్ అయిన తర్వాత చట్టం, లా అవుతుంది. రైట్. సో అండ్ వాట్ ఈస్ ద మెజారిటీ దట్ ఈస్ రిక్వైర్డ్? వాట్ ఈస్ ద మెజారిటీ దట్ ఈస్ రిక్వైర్డ్ టు పాస్ ది ఆర్డినెన్స్? The majority that is required to pass the ordinance. So if you take this majority, if you take the majority that is required to pass the ordinance, it is simple majority. It is simple majority. The majority that is required to pass the ordinance. The majority that is required to pass the ordinance is simple majority. So whenever an ordinance is passed by simple majority, whenever an ordinance is passed by simple majority, in such condition this ordinance becomes the law. Right. So this is what about the procedure for passing the ordinance. Right. So once again I repeat regarding the procedure of ordinance. The ordinance is issued when no house of parliament is in session. These ordinances are issued on the advice of Prime Minister by President of India. These ordinances are issued only when there is a satisfactory grounds, that is a compelling situation which requires immediate law of parliament. Right. The ordinance that is issued by President will have a life of 6 months. This ordinance should be tabled, right, as soon as the parliament comes into session. And not only tabling of ordinance, even the grounds for issuing the ordinance, should be tabled in the house. That is, both the ordinance as well as the grounds for issuing the ordinance, both should be tabled. Both should be tabled in the house. Alright. So once the ordinances are passed, alright, so the ordinance becomes a law. But here this ordinance should be passed within a period of 6 weeks. The ordinance should be passed within a period of 6 weeks. And the majority that is required to pass the ordinance is simple majority. The majority that is required to pass the ordinance is simple majority. Okay. Alright. Now, whether it is mandatory to pass the ordinance, whether it is always mandatory to pass the ordinance, whether it is compulsory to pass the ordinance. అంటే ఆర్డినెన్స్ ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేయగానే, అంటే ఆర్డినెన్స్ పార్లమెంట్లో ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేయగానే ఖచ్చితంగా ఆర్డినెన్స్ని పాస్ చేయాలా? నౌ ఐ వాంట్ యువర్ ఆన్సర్స్. ద వన్ హు ఆర్ ఇన్ ఆన్లైన్, ప్లీజ్ డూ గివ్ మీ ది ఆన్సర్స్. Please do give me the answers. Whether it is mandatory, so it is not mandatory. It is not always compulsory. It is not always compulsory to pass the ordinance. Alright, it is not compulsory. It is not always compulsory to pass the ordinance. Alright, so it is up to the parliament. It is up to the parliament either to pass the ordinance or it can what you call simply reject the ordinance. The ordinance either can be passed or it can be rejected. Alright, just to be online, I'll have some water. So it is not mandatory. It is not mandatory to have the ordinance, to issue the or to pass the ordinance. So it is up to the parliament. It is up to the parliament. So parliament either can pass the ordinance or it can reject the ordinance. It can pass the ordinance or it can reject the ordinance. All right. So this is what about the procedure for passing the ordinance. Now think that, imagine a situation where president has reissued, all right, reissuing of ordinance. Reissuing of an ordinance, technically called as a repromulgation. Technically it is called as repromulgation of an ordinance. Think that, all right, repromulgation or reissue. Whether President of India can repromulgate the ordinance after being rejected in the parliament. Right? Imagine a situation, the parliament has rejected the ordinance. The parliament has rejected the ordinance. Right? Even after rejection, do parliament can pass the ordinance? After rejection, do President of India can reissue the ordinance? Or promulgation of an ordinance after rejection? Now I want you to give the answers. Parliament reject chesindi. Parliament reject chesina sare, Parliament President of India అదే ఆర్డినెన్స్ మళ్ళీ రీఇష్యూ చేసుకోవచ్చా, చేయొచ్చా, చేయకూడదా? ఒకవేళ చేస్తే ఎన్నిసార్లు చేసుకోవచ్చు? ఫస్ట్ ఆఫ్ ఆల్, వెదర్ ప్రెసిడెంట్ కెన్ రీఇష్యూ ద సేమ్ ఆర్డినెన్స్ అగైన్ ఆఫ్టర్ రిజెక్షన్? Answer is yes. President of India has every power. President of India has every power to reissue the ordinance. President of India has the power to reissue the ordinance. Reissue of ordinance. An ordinance can be reissued for any number of times. An ordinance can be reissued for any number of times. There is no restriction. There is no restriction on number of. There is no restriction on number of ordinances issued by President of India. There is no restriction on number of ordinances issued by President of India. So constitutionally there is no bar. అంటే ఒక ఆర్డినెన్స్ని ఎన్నిసార్లు అయినా ఇష్యూ చేసుకోవచ్చు. కాన్స్టిట్యూషనల్ పరంగా ఎలాంటి రిస్ట్రిక్షన్ లేదు. So constitutionally there is no restriction on the number of ordinances issued by President on the same subject even after rejection. But think that if the same ordinance after being rejected by Parliament, when there is no compelling situations, the same ordinance is issued, don't you think it has misuse of powers by President of India? Don't you think it has misuse of powers? If same ordinance is issued by President of India, if same ordinance is issued by President of India, right, even after rejection, without having a proper conditions, don't you think it has misuse of powers? అవసరం లేకున్నా, సిచ్యువేషన్స్ డిమాండ్ చెయ్యకున్నా ప్రెసిడెంట్ అదే ఆర్డినెన్స్ని ఇష్యూ చేయడం, పదే ఇష్యూ చేయడం, రైట్, దాన్ని మనం మిస్యూజ్ ఆఫ్ పవర్స్ అని అనుకోవచ్చా, అనుకోకూడదా? Don't you think it has misuse of powers? Don't you call it as misuse of powers? What do you say? So definitely it is misuse of powers. Definitely it is an misuse of powers. Whether my voice is clear to you? The one who is online, whether my voice is clear to you? Am I audible? Yes. So if my voice is clear to you, then give me the answers. నేను చెప్పేది మీకు వినపడితే ఆన్సర్స్ చెప్పండి. సో డోంట్ థింక్ ఇట్ యాజ్ మిస్యూజ్ ఆఫ్ పవర్స్. డోంట్ థింక్ ఇట్ యాజ్ మిస్యూజ్ ఆఫ్ పవర్స్. Alright, so definitely it is misuse of powers by President of India. Alright, if when there is no what you call a satisfactory grounds, when there are no satisfactory grounds to issue the ordinance, then definitely such an ordinance, right, will be treated as a misuse of powers. Right, so this was said by Supreme Court in R.C. Cooper's case. R.C. Cooper versus Union of India case. It is in R.C. Cooper versus Union of India case. Supreme Court held that. Alright, the ordinances issued by President of India. Supreme Court held that the ordinances issued by President of India are subjected to. The ordinances issued by President of India are subjected to judicial review. Right, here it is not the ordinance, it is the grounds for issuing the ordinance will be reviewed. Supreme Court in R.C. Cooper case, right, Supreme Court in R.C. Cooper case upheld, it has upheld judicial review. It has upheld judicial review of the ordinances issued. It has upheld the judicial review of the ordinance upheld. Judicial review of the ordinances issued by President of India. So here the judicial review will be on the grounds that are used. The judicial review will be on the grounds that are used for issuing the ordinance. Right, so ఇది మీరు గుర్తుపెట్టుకోవాల్సిన పాయింట్. Right, so alright, the review will be on the grounds. Alright, I want to say one thing regarding Dharani. Alright, so Dharani just keep on what you call giving the answers. Right, have you took coaching earlier? Have you took coaching earlier? Right, and your answers are very good. Really, they are very simple, they are very lucid, and they are more attractive. Your answers are point to point, and this is the way you are required to write the answers in UPSC mains exam. Alright, really I got your answers are very simply superb. Alright, so that means I should expect a rank from you then. It is not about one person, the one who keeps on working. I always encourage them, even Ramakrishna. Alright, మీరు వర్క్ చేయండి, ఆటోమేటిక్గా ర్యాంక్ వస్తుంది. మీ హ్యాండ్ రైటింగ్ బాగుంది. రైట్, పాయింట్స్ రాసే విధానం బాగుంది, ప్రజెంటేషన్ బాగుంది. రైట్, క్లారిటీ బాగుంది, అంటే కాన్సెప్చువల్ క్లారిటీ బాగుంది. రైట్, సో దిస్ ఈస్ హౌ యూ షుడ్ రైట్ ఆన్సర్స్. రైట్, and if you can write answers in all the subjects, not just in polity, if you can do it in all the way, definitely you will be in a better position. Alright, so you said that you took coaching earlier. Alright, then so alright, that means there will be judicial review on the ordinances issued. Miru don't think me in a wrong way. I appreciate each and every candidate who is really sincere, who are committed to the exam. అది ఎవరైనా కావచ్చు. రైట్, నేను పేరు చెప్తున్నా అంటే అర్థం ఏంటిదంటే ఖచ్చితంగా వాళ్ళకు ఏదో ఒక దేర్ విల్ బి ఎ డే వేర్ దే విల్ సీ ద సక్సెస్. Alright, so I'll spell out anyone, I'll point anyone who is really committed and sincere to the exam. ఇక టాలెంట్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ కాదు, సివిల్స్ కావాల్సిన టాలెంట్ కాదు, కష్టపడే తత్వం కావాలి. వెన్ యూ హ్యావ్ ద హ్యాబిట్ ఆఫ్ వర్కింగ్, వెన్ యూ హ్యావ్ ద ప్యాషన్ ఆఫ్ క్రాకింగ్ ఎగ్జామ్, దిస్ ప్యాషన్ విల్ మేక్ యూ టు లెర్న్ ఎవ్రీథింగ్. ప్యాషన్ ఉంటే చాలు, సివిల్స్ కొట్టాలి అన్న తపన ఉంటే చాలు, మీరు అన్నీ నేర్చుకుంటారు. మీకు రాందంటూ ఏమీ ఉండదు. రైట్. కసి, పట్టుదల ఇవి రెండు ఖచ్చితంగా ఉండాలి. ఇవి రెండు ఉంటే ఎంత పెద్ద మొద్దైనా, అంటే మనము స్కూల్ లాంగ్వేజ్ మాట్లాడుకుంటే ఎంత మొద్దైనా సరే డెఫినెట్గా ర్యాంక్ కొడతాడు. సివిల్స్లో క్లెవరు, ఇంటెలిజెంట్, యావరేజ్, బిలో యావరేజ్ కాన్సెప్ట్లు ఉండవు. సివిల్స్లో అవి ఇమ్యాటర్. ద వన్ హూ వర్క్స్ హార్డ్ దే విల్ షైన్. Alright, so there will be judicial review. There will be judicial review. Alright, so this is clearly said by Supreme Court in R.C. Cooper's case. It is in R.C. Cooper's case. Alright, so judicial review of the grounds for issuing the ordinance. Alright, later on Supreme Court in I.R. Coelho case. Supreme Court in I.R. Coelho case. Even in this I.R. Coelho case, Supreme Court upheld judicial review of ordinances issued by President of India. So in I.R. Coelho case, Supreme Court held that I.R. Coelho versus State of Tamil Nadu case, it was in this case Supreme Court held that if the ordinances issued by President violates fundamental rights of the citizens, if an ordinance issued by President of India violates fundamental rights, then such ordinance, right, can be nullified. Such an ordinance can be nullified. Alright, all such ordinances can be nullified by Supreme Court. Supreme Court has every power. Supreme Court has every power to invalidate any such ordinance. Invalidate any such ordinance, right, that violates fundamental rights. ఒకవేళ ప్రెసిడెంట్ ఇష్యూ చేసిన ఆర్డినెన్స్ ఫండమెంటల్ రైట్స్ని వయలేట్ చేస్తే ఖచ్చితంగా అలాంటి ఆర్డినెన్స్కి ఎలాంటి వ్యాలిడిటీ ఉండదు. రైట్. సో దిస్ ఈస్ క్లియర్లీ స్టేటెడ్ బై సుప్రీం కోర్ట్ ఇన్ I.R. Coelho case. That means the crux of this debate is the ordinances issued by President of India. The ordinances issued by President of India, they are subjected to judicial review. They are subjected to judicial review. Okay. Alright, so this is what we should remember. Alright, so this is about the ordinance being power of president. So we have seen the procedure for issuing the ordinance, the procedure in parliament, and the judicial review. So now can we say that there is both judicial safeguard as well as a legislative safeguard against the misuse of powers by president? Can we say that there is both judicial safeguard and legislative safeguard against ordinance making powers of President of India? Safeguards ఉన్నాయని చెప్పచ్చా చెప్పలేమా? సేఫ్గార్డ్స్ ఉన్నాయని చెప్పచ్చా చెప్పలేమా? Can we say that there are safeguards against the ordinance being powers of president? Say yes or no. So you are unable to judge. So there is a discussion in parliament, right? If you take this ordinance, right, the ordinance is placed in parliament, right? This ordinance is placed in parliament. At the same time there is also judicial review. That means what? So discussions, debates, passage in parliament is a legislative safeguard. It is legislative safeguard. Alright, whereas the judicial review is a judicial safeguard. So the judicial review acts as judicial safeguard. So there is both legislative safeguard as well as judicial safeguard against the ordinance issued by President of India, against the ordinances made by President. So that is, so in case of misuse, right, there is both judiciary as well as parliament to safeguard the interest of people, safeguard the rights of people. Am I clear on this? Am I clear on ordinance being power of President? Am I clear on ordinance being power of President? Am I clear on ordinance being power of President of India? Yes or no? So take down a question at this point. Take down a question on the in this regard. Take down a question. Discuss legislative and judicial safeguards. Discuss legislative and judicial safeguards against. Discuss legislative and judicial safeguards against ordinance making power of President of India. Against ordinance making power of President of India. Against ordinance being power of President of India. Discuss legislative and judicial safeguards. Legislative and judicial safeguards against discuss legislative and judicial safeguards. Discuss legislative and judicial safeguards against ordinance being power of President. Right. So one of the doubt was raised by Ramakrishna, whether if ordinance is defeated in the House, think that if an ordinance is defeated in the House of Parliament, can it lead to no confidence motion? Can it lead to introduction of no confidence motion? Remember, definitely, if an ordinance is rejected in the floor of the House, it will be a ground, it can be a ground for introducing no confidence motion. A no confidence motion can be introduced if ordinance is rejected. If this ordinance, if that ordinance is treated as an important one by the government, if it is regarded as an important ordinance of the government, then defeat of that ordinance definitely will be a ground for issuing no confidence motion. Not only ordinance, whatever the bill which the parliament thinks as important for the government, if such a bill is defeated, అంటే ఏ బిల్ అయితే గవర్నమెంట్కి ఇంపార్టెంట్ అనుకుంటారో ఆ బిల్ని డిఫీట్ చేసినప్పుడు, ఆ బిల్ని రిజెక్ట్ చేసినప్పుడు ఖచ్చితంగా నో కాన్ఫిడెన్స్ మోషన్ని ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేసుకోవచ్చు. అది ఆర్డినెన్స్ కావచ్చు, ఏ బిల్ అయినా సరే, వాట్ ఎవర్ ద బిల్ ఇట్ మే బీ, the bill is deemed to be important for the government of India, and if such a bill is rejected in the floor of the House, definitely, all right, it can be a ground for introducing, all right, it can be a ground for introducing no confidence motion. It can be a ground for introducing no confidence motion. Am I clear? So no confidence motions can be introduced. No confidence motions can be introduced. All right. If ordinance is defeated, and along with the ordinance, all right, if any other important bill is defeated. Am I clear to you, Ramakrishna? Whether your doubt got cleared? Just give me the response. All right. All right. So this is what you call the issue of ordinance making power of President of India. So we have seen a different legislative powers of President, right from what you call summoning, proroguing, dissolving, nominating the members, giving of address, speech, right, then introduction of bills, using of veto powers, then ordinance making powers. So all these are legislative powers of President of India. Next coming on to judicial powers, right? Next coming on to judicial powers of President of India, right? So which are mentioned in Article 72, judicial powers of President of India. Judicial powers of President of India, that is, which are mentioned in Article 72 of Indian Constitution. So Article 72 of Indian Constitution deals with the judicial powers which are enjoyed by President. So I am waiting for Ramakrishna for your response. So whether your doubt got cleared or not. Alright, Saujanya just now has coming to the judicial powers, it includes pardoning powers, power to pardon, commute, remit, that is remission, providing of respite, then reprieve, right. So these are 5 types of judicial powers which are enjoyed by President of India, right. Power to pardon, commute, remission, respite and reprieve, right. So these are different types of what you call judicial powers enjoyed by President of India. So coming to pardon, right. So pardon means providing a relief from all the forms of punishments. Providing relief from all the forms of punishments. Right? Any form of punishment, including death punishment. Right? So it involves absolving all the forms of punishments. Right? So it is about absolving all the forms of punishment. Alright, that is what pardon means. So pardon denotes relief, right? Relief from all the forms of punishment. Telugulo cheppalante kshama bhiksha, kshaminchadam, right? So relief from all the forms of punishment, that is pardon. So President of India is the only authority who can grant pardon against death punishment, right? So President is the only authority to grant relief, to grant pardon from death punishment. Alright? So ఏ పనిష్మెంట్ అయినా సరే, ఈవెన్ మరణశిక్ష నుంచి కూడా రైట్ క్షమించే అధికారం ఒక ప్రెసిడెంట్కి మాత్రమే ఉంటుంది. అండ్ రిమెంబర్, all such judicial powers are exercised by President of India, particularly the pardoning power on death punishment. It is exercised by President on the report of Home Ministry, on the report of Union Home Ministry. Right? So this is exercised by President of India. This is exercised by President of India on the report of Union Home Ministry. That means the report of Union Home Ministry is binding on President of India. Alright, so ఇది చాలా ఇంపార్టెంట్, గుర్తుపెట్టుకోండి. Alright, so in the case of pardoning death punishment, President of India will act on President of India will act on the report of Home Ministry. The report of Home Ministry. Alright, that is what pardon means. Now coming to commute. Commute means, it means reducing the punishment. Right? So substitution of a lower punishment to the higher punishment. That is, the higher punishment is replaced by a lower punishment. So commutation. Technically we call it as commutation. Commutation means replacement of higher punishment. That is, replacement of punishment with higher character. Right? Replacement of punishment with higher character with that of lower character. Right? That is what commutation means. That is, the higher punishments are replaced. They are substituted by punishments with lower character. Right? So that is what. Alright. Commutation. That is what meant by commutation. So it is replacement of higher punishment with the lower punishments. Say for example, think that, right, a person is punished with death punishment. A person is given with death punishment. Alright. So in commutation, what happens is this death punishment is replaced by, say, a punishment with life imprisonment. Alright, punishment with life imprisonment. Alright. So a death punishment here in this case, it is being replaced by, right? It is being replaced by what you call a life imprisonment. That means the higher punishments are replaced by lower punishments. Higher punishments are replaced by lower punishments. Alright. So this is about commutation. So am I clear about pardon and commutation? Am I clear about pardon and commutation? Am I clear about pardoning and punishment, commutations? We have seen both these. I want your responses. Please do respond. I'm unable to know whether you are understanding or not. Alright. So, okay. Alright. So this is about commutation. Now coming to remission. So in remission, alright, remission denotes, right, the amount of punishment is reduced. It is reduction in the amount of punishment, right? So remission involves reduction in amount of punishment without changing the character. Without changing the character. Right? So right, without changing the character. That means the character of punishment will be same. The character of punishment will be same, right? But the amount of punishment is reduced. Say for example, let me take one example. Think that a person is given a 7 years rigorous imprisonment. Think that a person is punished with a 7 years rigorous imprisonment. So when the person is given, when there is a remission of punishment, it means from 7 years to say 3 years rigorous imprisonment. The character of punishment is not changed. The character of punishment is not changed. What is changed is, it is what you call the amount of punishment, right? Here the amount of punishment is changed. The amount of punishment is changed, right, without changing the character. That is what called as remission. That is what called as remission. All right. So right, so remission involves right, decrease in the amount of punishment, without change in the character of punishment. It is decrease in the amount of punishment without change in the character of punishments. All right. So this is what about remission, right? Respite. Another thing is respite, right? What do you mean by respite? In respite, right, payment of penalty is imposed. So imposed, that is replacement of punishment by a penalty, right? Replacement of punishment by penalty. Sometimes we see this. Sometimes we see the amount of punishment is replaced by payment of penalties. Right? So this is normal use. Say for example, right, drunken drive case. Right? So either you pay penalty or a jail term or both. That means there is a chance of replacement of jail term by payment of penalty. So penalty can be replaced by jail terms. I'm really sorry. The jail terms are replaced by penalty. So imposition of penalty in place of jail terms. So there can be a chance. Normally, say for example, if a woman is convicted, and think that woman is a pregnant woman, right? If a pregnant woman is convicted, whether it is wise to jail or convict that pregnant woman, morally whether it is wise to jail a pregnant woman. Now, what is your answer? Okay, pregnant woman ni jail పంపేయడం సరైనదా కాదా? Convicted, that lady is convicted. Now what happens in such condition? Alright, the jail term can be replaced by payment of penalty. So this is what can be done. So this is one option. For for President of India. So he can provide respite. The death convict in Rajiv Gandhi assassination case, Nalini, you all know about this, right? The death convict of Rajiv Gandhi assassination, right? Nalini, she was given respite when she was pregnant, right? So even there is a kind of payment of penalty. So this is one kind of option for President of India. Coming to reprieve, another judicial power is reprieve. So reprieve means stay in the execution of punishment, a temporary delay that can be caused, right? Stay in the execution of punishment. It is stay in the execution of punishment. All right. Alright, so it means a temporary delay that can be caused. It means a temporary delay that can be caused. Alright, so it is a temporary delay that can be caused in what you call in the imposition of punishment. That is, instead of immediately implementing the punishment, there can be what you call a delay. There can be a delay that is caused in the punishments. Right? So it is up to the president. Say for example, when there is a death punishment imposed, instead of executing the death punishment, President of India can provide reprieve. So if there is a reprieve given, so there will be a delay in the execution of punishment. So president can cause a delay. That is, when there is a pardoning petition is pending, right? If a petition pleading for pardon, is pending with the President of India, so instead of taking a decision, instead of executing the death punishment, the President of India can create a delay by using this reprieve. Alright, so these are different judicial powers: pardoning power, commutation, remission, respite and reprieve. Am I clear about these judicial powers? No, I want you to respond. Alright, so these are different judicial powers of President of India. Next, moving on to defense powers of President of India. Alright, so remember, President of India acts as Supreme Commander of Armed Forces. So it is President who is the Supreme Commander. It is the President who is the Supreme Commander of Armed Forces. That means all the armed forces, they are placed under President of India. So as a Supreme Commander of Armed Forces, right, the President of India can wage a war, right? So declaring a war against any country, right, declaring a war against any enemy, it is in the hands of President of India. So officially it is President, constitutionally it is President of India who can wage a war. Alright, so he is the Supreme Commander of Armed Forces. He can wage a war, or the President of India can declare peace. He can wage a war, or the President of India can declare the peace. Alright, so this is what about the defense powers of President. Now, who acts as head of nuclear command? Alright, who is the chairperson of nuclear command of India? Now I want you to give the answer. Who acts as head of nuclear command, whether President or Prime Minister or Defense Minister? Who is the head of Nuclear Command of India? I want you to give the answers. I have given three options. One is President, second one is Prime Minister, and third one is Union Defence Minister. Alright, who is the head of this nuclear command? It is Prime Minister of India. It is Prime Minister of India. It is Prime Minister of India who acts as head of nuclear command. So President is the Supreme Commander of Armed Forces. President is Supreme Commander of Armed Forces, right? And the Prime Minister is head of the nuclear command, right? So remember this point. So defense powers, diplomatic powers. So President of India enjoys diplomatic powers. So what do you mean by diplomatic powers? The power of President to maintain relations with other countries, right? So diplomatic powers means it is the power of President, to maintain relations, to maintain diplomatic relations with other countries. Alright, so it is the President of India, who initiates the process of maintaining relations. So not only maintaining relations but also cutting down the relations. అంటే వేరే కంట్రీస్ తోటి రిలేషన్స్ మెయింటైన్ చేసుకోవడము లేదా కట్ చేసుకోవడము, ఇది ప్రెసిడెంట్, రైట్, ఇది ప్రెసిడెంట్ exclusive power. That means it is done in the name of President of India. So this maintaining of relations or cutting down of relations, it is the exclusive power. It is the exclusive power of President of India. Am I clear? So this is diplomatic powers. And coming to emergency powers of President. Alright, emergency powers of President of India. So already we have seen President of India has the power to impose how many types of emergencies? Whether 2 types of emergencies or 3 types of emergencies. How many types of emergencies can be imposed by President of India? Whether 2 or 3? It is 3 types of emergencies. Alright, Shashidhar, chala late response. Alright, you are late to class then. Alright, so okay, good. Alright, so it is national emergency, state emergency and financial emergency. అంటే నాకు ఎవరైతే ఆన్సర్స్ రెగ్యులర్గా ఇస్తూ ఉంటారో ఐ విల్ ఎక్స్పెక్ట్ దెమ్ ఇన్ ద క్లాస్. There are few people who keep on giving the answers continuously, very frequently, and I always check their face. I always check their names in the chat box. Alright, so it is 3 types of emergencies. Which are issued by President of India: national emergency, state emergency and financial emergency. So this is emergency powers. So already have discussed this, so there is no need to have an elaborate discussion. Coming to other miscellaneous powers, let me talk about this. Say for example, administration of tribal areas and scheduled areas, right? Administration of tribal areas and scheduled areas. Alright, let me explain this point. Alright, so these tribal areas and scheduled areas which are mentioned in 5th schedule and 6th schedule. Alright, the scheduled areas which are mentioned in 5th schedule, the tribal areas which are mentioned in 6th schedule. So they are placed under President of India. So President has the exclusive power to designate an area as a scheduled area or a tribal area, and even constituting autonomous councils, constitution of autonomous councils to these areas. It is again the exclusive power of President of India, and the entire administration of these areas, they are placed under President of India, and on behalf of President of India, it is the governor of that states. రైట్. నేను మళ్ళీ తర్వాత చెప్తా, ఇట్ ఇస్ సపరేట్ చాప్టర్ ఫర్ అస్. Administration of scheduled areas and tribal areas is a separate chapter for us, but as of now remember that it is governors of the concerned states. It is governors of the concerned states, right? It is governors of the concerned states, right, which will execute or which will it is governors who will discharge these executive responsibilities on behalf of President of India. So the discharging of functions is done by governors, but it is on behalf of President of India. Am I clear? Right? So this is one thing. And even if you take what you call role of President with respect to union territories, right? So even these union territories are directly placed under what you call President, right? Appointment of chief ministers of the duties. Say for example, UT is having assemblies, that is New Delhi, that is then Puducherry, Jammu Kashmir. Of course, right, as of now Jammu Kashmir has no chief minister, but coming to the Delhi and Puducherry, the appointment of chief ministers, the other ministers, then what you call removal of ministers, it is done by President of India. It is done by President of India. Alright. So these are some of the miscellaneous responsibilities of President of India. Alright. So this is what about President of India. So take down one question on President of India. Take down a question on President of India. Let me sit for 2 minutes and take the class. Alright. So take down a question on this President of India. The President of India. The President of India, though being a constitutional head of the nation, the President of India, though being a constitutional head of the government, though being a constitutional head of the government, cannot become an authoritative, cannot become authoritative. Once again I repeat the question. President of India, though is a constitutional head, President of India, though a constitutional head of the union government, cannot become authoritative, cannot become authoritative. Comment, sorry, not comment, discuss it. Cannot become authoritative. Discuss. Have you understood the question? Have you noted the question first? Have you noted the question? క్వశ్చన్ రాసుకున్నారా లేదా? క్వశ్చన్ రాయండి. క్వశ్చన్స్ ఒకటే కాదు, దానికి ఆన్సర్స్ కూడా రాసి పంపించండి. డన్. రైట్. Alright, so this is one thing. So now coming to another part of union executive, that is after president. Alright, let me talk about vice president of India. Let me talk about vice president of India. Alright. So next after president in the table of presidents, it is vice president. So if you take the election of vice president, so I'll talk about the election of vice president, the removal of vice president, and the powers and functions of vice president. Alright. So if you take this vice president, so he is elected as vice president but removed as, ఇక్కడ తేడా ఏంటిదంటే ఎలక్షన్ ఏమో వైస్ ప్రెసిడెంట్, సో ఈజ్ ఎలక్టెడ్ యాజ్ వైస్ ప్రెసిడెంట్, elected as vice president but removed as chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Election is as Vice President of India removes as chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Alright. So first, if we take the election, right? So Vice President is elected by Electoral College. He is elected by Electoral College. Right? So Electoral College consisting of members of both members of Parliament. Right? So if we take this election, the election is done by members of Electoral College. That is, it consists of members of Parliament. It consists of members of Parliament. That is, MPs of Parliament. So when we call it as members of Parliament, does it even includes nominated members? Does it includes nominated members? Whether nominated members have a role in election of President of India. Right? In the election of President of India, do nominated members have a role in the election of President? President election lo alright, nominated members participate chestara cheyyara? So what is your answer? What is your answer? So already we have seen the composition of Electoral College electing the President of India. Alright, so in the election of President, there is no role for nominated members. But coming to election of Vice President, it is members of Parliament. That means it includes both the elected members as well as nominated members. It includes both elected members as well as nominated members. Alright, in the election of President, there is no place for nominated members. But in the case of Vice President, they will take part in the election of Vice President. Alright, okay. So mind this change between the composition of Electoral College for President and Vice President. Alright, so the same principle of single transferable vote, proportional representation system by single transferable vote. Alright, so this is the principle of election. And coming to the qualifications required, to get elected as member of Rajya Sabha, to get elected as Vice President should be citizen of India, should have attained the age of 35 years, should not hold any office of profit. Again, the office of governor is exempted here, and should possess all the qualifications required to get elected as member of Rajya Sabha. The twist here is, in case of Vice President, the Vice President should possess all the qualifications, that are required, to get elected as member of Rajya Sabha. In case of President requires qualifications of member of Lok Sabha, whereas in case of Vice President, it is qualification of member of Rajya Sabha. Right? So again you see this change. Except this, all are same. Alright. So the person to contest as election of to contest to the office of Vice President should possess all the qualifications required to get elected as member of Rajya Sabha. Okay. So this is one thing. Alright. Now coming to the functions of Rajya Sabha. Alright. Vice President. Vice President constitutionally acts as ex officio chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Vice President is ex officio chairperson. Alright. Vice President acts as ex officio chairperson of Rajya Sabha. So this is the constitutional responsibility given to Vice President. So constitutionally he acts as chairperson of Rajya Sabha. So he performs all the functions as a chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Right? So I will discuss this when I teach both the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. That is when I teach Union Parliament. But as of now, remember that the constitutional responsibility of Vice President is to act as ex officio chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Not only this, if you take this chairperson, not only this, if you take Vice President, he will act as acting president, right? Vice President acts as acting president whenever there is a temporary vacancy. In case of temporary vacancy in the office of President, say for example, for time being, if President is on leave or if President is on official tour to other countries, for time being if President cannot discharge his functions. So that is whenever there is a temporary vacancy in the office of President of India. So in case of temporary vacancy in the office of President of India, alright, there will be Vice President who will be acting as acting President. So in this case, in case of death, in case of designation. So until new President is elected, it is Vice President who will act as acting President. Right? It is Vice President who will act as acting President. Alright? Alright? So this is about what you call alright, the functions of Vice President. This is about the functions of Vice President. Alright? Right? Then removal of Vice President. So how Vice President is removed? On what grounds the Vice President is removed? As I said, Vice President is removed as the chairperson of Rajya Sabha. That means this process will be initiated in Rajya Sabha first. Right? So a resolution to remove the the chairperson of Rajya Sabha should be passed by special majority. Should be passed by special majority in Rajya Sabha. It should be passed by special majority in Rajya Sabha. That is 2/3 of all the members present and voting. Right? The charges against the Rajya Sabha chairperson are introduced. They are discussed. Right? And there will be voting. And during the process of removal of chairperson of Rajya Sabha, the Rajya Sabha chairperson will not chair the house. During the process of removal, the chairperson of Rajya Sabha will not chair the house. Now it will be the deputy chairperson. So ఎప్పుడైతే రాజ్యసభ చైర్మన్ని తీసేసే తీర్మానం అంటే తీసేసే ప్రక్రియ తీసేసే ప్రాసెస్లో రాజ్యసభ చైర్మన్ హౌస్ని చైర్ చేయడానికి వీల్లేదు. రైట్? సో రిమూవల్ ప్రాసెస్లో రాజ్యసభ చైర్మన్ రైట్ చైర్పర్సన్గా యాక్ట్ చేయడానికి వీల్లేదు. సో అతని ప్లేస్లో ఎవరు యాక్ట్ చేస్తారు? ఇన్ ప్లేస్ ఆఫ్ చైర్పర్సన్ ఆఫ్ రాజ్యసభ, who will act as chairperson? It is deputy chair. It is deputy chairperson who will act as chairperson. Right? So there is no right for the chairperson to act as the chair. It is the deputy chairperson who will act as chairperson. If it is deputy chairperson who will act as chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Right? So, and there will be a discussion on the charges, right? Debate, discussions and voting. The majority that is required is special majority. Alright? That is 2/3 of all the members present and voting. So after passing the resolution in Rajya Sabha, the same resolution is sent to Lok Sabha. So first it is Rajya Sabha, then it is sent to Lok Sabha. If Lok Sabha agrees to the charges, by passing the same resolution, right, with the majority of the members present and voting, right. So if Lok Sabha agrees by a majority of members, of the house, that means what do you mean by majority of the members? Should we treat it as what you call special majority or simple majority? So we are saying that it is majority of the members present and voting in Lok Sabha. What does it mean? Should we mean it as special majority or simple majority? So when we are using the word, right, majority of the members, it means simple majority, right? It means simple majority of all the members present and voting. So the resolution requires special majority in Rajya Sabha and, right, a majority of the members present and voting in Lok Sabha. That is by simple majority of all the members present and voting. So this is the process for removing the what you call Vice President of India, right? And not only what you call Vice President can be removed, but at the same time Vice President can also resign from the office. He can also get resign from the office, right? So if Vice President want to resign from the office, the resignation, right, the resignation should be given to whom? The resignation should be given to what you call President of India. So President gives his resignation to Vice President, and Vice President tenders his resignation to President of India, right? So this is how there can be a vacancy. So resignation, what you call removal, right, and death as usual cause, right? And what is the tenure of Vice President? What is the tenure of Vice President? What is the tenure of Vice President? If you take the tenure of Vice President, upon entering into the office, right, the Vice President will stay in the office for a period of 5 years, right? So normally for all the particularly you take President or Vice President or Union Government or Governor, all they stay in the office for a period of 5 years. Their normal tenure is 5 years. Alright, can we say that the Vice President stays in the office at the pleasure of President? Can we say that the Vice President stays in the office at the pleasure of President? Pleasure of President అర్థమేంలే అంటే పెద్ద ఇష్యూగా ప్లెజర్ ఆఫ్ ప్రెసిడెంట్ మీన్స్ ప్లెజర్ ఆఫ్ ప్రెసిడెంట్ అంటే అర్థం ప్రెసిడెంట్ ఎప్పుడు కావాలంటే అప్పుడు వైస్ ప్రెసిడెంట్ని రిమూవ్ చేసుకునే అధికారం. అంటే ఎప్పుడంటే అప్పుడు ప్రెసిడెంట్ వైస్ ప్రెసిడెంట్ని రిమూవ్ చేసుకోవచ్చా, చేయొచ్చా, చేయలేదా? వెదర్ ప్రెసిడెంట్ కెన్ రిమూవ్ వైస్ ప్రెసిడెంట్ ఎట్ ఎనీ పాయింట్ ఆఫ్ టైమ్? Whether President can remove Vice President at any point of time? First of all, do President has the power to remove Vice President? Do President has the power to remove Vice President? President has no powers to remove Vice President. How Vice President is removed? Only by passing a resolution in Parliament. Right? Without passing a resolution in Parliament, President cannot remove them. That means what? The Vice President will not stay in the office. The Vice President will not stay in the office at the pleasure of President. It is not at the pleasure of President. It is at the pleasure of Parliament. The Vice President stays in the office. The Vice President stays in the office at the pleasure of Parliament, but not at the pleasure of President. So mind this, right? Remember this point. So normally if you take governors stay in the office at the pleasure of President, but not the Vice President. The Vice President will not stay. The Vice President will not stay in the office at the pleasure of President of India. Am I clear? Am I clear on this point? అర్థమైందా లేదా? So please do respond. Please do respond. Am I clear or not? So I'll do one thing. I'll take a break of what you call 10 minutes. Again, I'll join the class at. I'll take a break of 10 minutes. So I will resume the class after 10 minutes. Don't run away. So, welcome back. So, we have seen the president and vice president. Coming to prime minister and his council of ministers. Prime minister and the council of ministers. Alright. So, if you take the position of prime minister, so first let me talk about prime minister. So, if you take this prime minister, the role description of prime minister in a parliamentary system of government, he is regarded as primus inter pares. Prime minister is regarded as primus inter pares. Alright. So, which means first among the equals. So, prime minister is regarded as first among the equals. He is the first among the equals. Alright. And he always acts as a leader, a captain of the council of ministers. Alright. So, that is what the position of prime minister. So, he is even treated as the hyphen that joins the entire what you call a council of ministers. He is just like a sun in the entire what you call solar system of council of ministers. So, if we regard council of ministers as the solar system, in that solar system it is prime minister who acts as what you call a sun. Right. He is sun in the council of ministers. Alright. So, first of all, alright, this is what about the role of prime minister. So, already previously, that is when I have taught executive powers of president of India, right, just check the previous classes. When I taught executive powers of president, I have clearly mentioned the appointment and removal of prime minister and other council of ministers, right. So, already I have mentioned, I have clearly discussed this appointment and removal of prime minister and other council of ministers. Just I will have a brief rewind of it. So, prime minister and other council of ministers are appointed by president of India. Alright, it is president of India who appoints prime minister and other council of ministers. And the criteria for appointing prime minister is it is what you call the leader of majority party. It is the leader of majority party who acts as the prime minister, right, who is appointed as prime minister. The one who is elected as leader of majority party, he is appointed as prime minister, right. So, this is what, and all other ministers are appointed by president of India on the recommendation of prime minister. So, president has no choice either in appointing the prime minister or in appointing the council of ministers, right. So, this is what we should remember. Right. So, alright. So, let me focus on the functions of prime minister. Alright, let me focus on. So, as I already talked about appointment removal, so let me focus on functions of prime minister. Alright. If you take this prime minister, right, he acts as the real executive in parliamentary system of government. That is, he is the real head of government. So, let me use one chart. Alright. So, we can discuss the role of prime minister with respect to government, with respect to his ministry, right? Ministry or departments with respect to cabinet, right? With respect to President of India, the role of Prime Minister with respect to President of India, with respect to Parliament, right? So there are extra constitutional bodies. There are constitutional bodies which are placed under Prime Minister. Say for example, Prime Minister's office, PMO, right? Extra constitutional bodies, right? With respect to center-state relations. So role of Prime Minister with respect to center-state relations, right? And if you take the present contemporary world, right? Don't we see a dominant role played by Prime Minister in the international scenario? Can we say that in the last 10 years, the role change that can be seen in Prime Minister office is, it is the dominant role played by Prime Minister at the international level in the global affairs. Yes or no? Can we say that the Prime Minister of India had right, even played a dominant role at the international level. So in promoting international relations, with respect to his own political party, right? Role of Prime Minister with respect to political party, because even before a Prime Minister, he is a member of the political party, he is also leader of the political party. So definitely Prime Minister has a role with respect to political party, right? So these are different heads, where we can see the roles of what we call Prime Minister, right? As a head of the government, what is the role played by Prime Minister? Now I want you to give the response. I want you to give the answers. As the head of the government, what are different roles played by Prime Minister? What are different roles played by Prime Minister? Now, whether can you hear my voice? Whether I am audible to you? Whether my voice is clear to you? Because I am not able to see any kind of chart. The entire chart has got disappeared. Whether my voice is clear to you, am I audible to you? Okay, now I can see. Alright, so as a head of the government, what kind of roles that do the Prime Minister plays? So if you take with respect to government, it is the Prime Minister who sets the goals, the objectives, as well as he sets the agenda for the government, right? So the goals of government are determined by Prime Minister. It is the Prime Minister who clearly clarifies the goals to be achieved, the objectives to be achieved. Not only this, to achieve the goals of government, he is the one who clearly divides the work among the members of government. The work of government is divided by Prime Minister. Alright. So he divides the work of government among the members of government. Right. So Prime Minister is involved in division of work, coordinating the work, supervising the work of different ministers. Alright. So he sets the goal. He divides the work of government, he assigns the work to the different members of the government, that is to the different ministers, right? He clearly prescribes the outcomes that are expected, right? Because గుర్తుపెట్టుకోండి, అతను లీడర్, ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్ అన్నవాడు లీడర్ ఆఫ్ ది గవర్నమెంట్. యాజ్ లీడర్ ఆఫ్ ది గవర్నమెంట్ వాట్ హీ విల్ డూ? As a leader of the government, what he will do, right? He is involved in these kind of activities, right? So remember, right, he being the leader of the cabinet, leader of council of ministers, he assigns work among the members of the government, right? Divides, integrates, coordinates, supervises, right? All these are the functions which are performed by prime minister. Simply we can call it as పాస్ట్ కార్బ్ ఫంక్షన్స్. ఎవరైతే పబ్లిక్ అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్ తీసుకుంటారో వాళ్ళకి ఈజీగా అర్థమవుద్ది, రైట్? పాస్ట్ కార్బ్ ఫంక్షన్స్. సో పాస్ట్ కార్బ్ ఫంక్షన్స్ ఆర్ పర్ఫార్మ్డ్ బై ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్. ప్లానింగ్, ఆర్గనైజింగ్, స్టాఫింగ్, డైరెక్టింగ్, కోఆర్డినేటింగ్, రిపోర్టింగ్, బడ్జెటింగ్. సో రైట్, if you take this prime minister is involved in planning, he is involved in organizing, right? He is involved in directing, he is involved in coordinating the work of all the members of government, right? So the students of public administration, right, what you call, listen carefully, because the same thing you are required to write in public administration also. పబ్బాడికి పాలిటీకి తేడా లేదు, ఇక్కడ నుంచి మొత్తం అంతా యాజ్ ఇట్ ఈస్కి పబ్లిక్ అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషనే, రైట్? సో ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్ is involved in planning of goals, objectives, right? And there are, right, certain cabinet committees which are headed by prime minister. So prime minister not only acts as head of council of ministers, but he is also the head of cabinet committees. So one of the important features of parliamentary system of government is existence of cabinet committees, right? The entire work of government is assisted by these cabinet committees. So there is a cabinet. If you take this council of ministers, so in this council of ministers we have cabinet, all right? So if this is council of ministers, so this is the cabinet, and there is a cabinet within the cabinet which is called as kitchen cabinet. So normally we have council of ministers, we have cabinet, and we have kitchen cabinet, also called as core cabinet meeting. మనం చాలా సార్లు వింటూ ఉంటాం న్యూస్లో, రైట్? ద వర్డ్ ఆఫ్ కోర్ క్యాబినెట్, రైట్? సో core cabinet means a cabinet within the cabinet, the most important members of the cabinet. Normally the most important members of council of ministers are appointed as cabinet members, and the most important members within the cabinet, they are appointed as core cabinet, they are appointed as kitchen cabinet, right? So make this difference. So there is a word called as core cabinet and council of ministers. So is there any limitation on the size of council of ministers? ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్ ఎంతమందినైనా మినిస్టర్స్కి అపాయింట్ చేసుకోవచ్చా, లేదా ఏమైనా లిమిటేషన్ ఉందా, ఏమైనా రిస్ట్రిక్షన్ ఉందా? ఈజ్ దేర్ ఎనీ రిస్ట్రిక్షన్ ఆన్ ది సైజ్ ఆఫ్ కౌన్సిల్ ఆఫ్ మినిస్టర్స్? Right? So definitely, right, this core cabinet sometimes is also called as super cabinet, right? It is also called as super cabinet. So kitchen cabinet, core cabinet, super cabinet, right? And even there is another term called as shadow cabinet. ఆ తర్వాత చెప్తాను, కానీ నాకు ఫస్ట్ చెప్పిన ఆన్సర్ చెప్పండి. సో ఈజ్ దేర్ ఎనీ లిమిటేషన్ ఆన్ ది సైజ్ ఆఫ్ కౌన్సిల్ ఆఫ్ మినిస్టర్స్? Right? So remember, by 93rd Amendment Act in 2001, right? Article 75 was changed. That is, there are changes, amendments are made to Article 75 by this 93rd Amendment Act, which has clearly imposed, right, a limitation on the size of council of ministers. There is a limitation on the size of council of ministers. So what is this limitation? The total strength of council of ministers should not be more than, right, 15% of strength of Lok Sabha. Alright, so the strength of Council of Ministers in the center as well as states. Alright, the size of Council of Ministers both in center and states should not be more than 15% of strength of Lok Sabha. So what is strength of Lok Sabha? It is 550. So 15% of 550 అంటే 15% ఆఫ్ 550 కన్నా ఎక్కువ ఉండడానికి వీలు లేదు. సింపుల్గా చెప్పాలంటే సైజ్ ఆఫ్ కౌన్సిల్ ఆఫ్ మినిస్టర్స్ 75 కన్నా ఎక్కువ ఉండడానికి వీలు లేదు. రైట్, ఇఫ్ యు టేక్ ది గవర్నమెంట్స్ ఇన్ ఇండియా, right, there were days in India where the size of council of ministers were even more than 140. Right, if you take the PV Narasimha Rao government, still I remember the days, my school days. Right, if you take the PV Narasimha Rao government, in PV Narasimha Rao government, right, the total number of ministers were almost around 136 or 146. A jumbo cabinet antam dani manam, it is simply called as jumbo cabinet or jumbo cabinet. More than 100, more than 120, right, there is no limit. అంటే ఎలెక్ట్ అయిన ప్రతి ఒక్కడు ఎంపీ అయిన అంటే మెజార్టీ పార్టీకి సంబంధించిన ప్రతి ఎంపీని మినిస్టర్కి అపాయింట్ చేసిండు. రైట్, ఎలెక్ట్ అయిన ప్రతి ఎంపీ మెజార్టీ పార్టీకి సంబంధించిన ప్రతి ఒక్క ఎంపీని మినిస్ట్రీ ఇవ్వడం, ఇది జరిగింది ఇండియాలో. 100, 120, 140, 130 చాలా ఉండేది. సో ఇది అవాయిడ్ చేయడం కోసము వెన్ దెర్ ఇస్ వెన్ ద స్ట్రెంత్ ఆఫ్ కౌన్సిల్ ఆఫ్ మినిస్టర్స్ ఈజ్ లార్జర్, what will be the issue or where will be the impact? If the size of council of ministers is higher, right, what will happen? Where the impact is seen? The impact will be seen on decision making. It is not that easy. It won't be easy for the prime minister to take the decisions. Right, it won't be easy for the prime minister to take the decisions. It will be difficult to take the decisions by prime minister. అంత ఈజీ కాదు, డెసిషన్స్ తీసుకోవడం అంత ఈజీ కాదు. రైట్, ఇట్ విల్ బి డిఫికల్ట్ ఫర్ ద ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్ టు టేక్ ది డెసిషన్స్. రైట్, బెటర్ డెసిషన్ మేకింగ్, రైట్, ఎఫిషియంట్ డెసిషన్ మేకింగ్ కెన్ బి టేకన్. ఎఫిషియంట్ డెసిషన్ మేకింగ్ ఈజ్ పాసిబుల్ ఓన్లీ వెన్ దేర్ ఈజ్ a limitation on size of council of ministers. Okay, all right, so this is what about the size. So there is a restriction. This limitation, right, came to existence from 2001. All right, so out of this 75, nearly 10 to 15 are appointed as cabinet. And out of this 10 to 15, right, 4 to 5 members are appointed as 4 to 5 members are seen as core cabinet or what you call super cabinet. Say for example, if you take the present day Modi government, right, who are the 5 most important members of the government? If you think about core cabinet, who are that core cabinet? Narendra Modi okaru, Amit Shah okaru, right, tarvata జయశంకర్ ఒకరు, రాజ్నాథ్ సింగ్ ఒకరు, రైట్, సో పీయూష్ గోయల్ ఇంకొక పర్సన్ ఎక్కువ ఆధారపడేది. అంటే దీస్ ఆర్ ది మోస్ట్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ మెంబర్స్ ఆఫ్ ది గవర్నమెంట్. రైట్, సో దిస్ ఇస్ హౌ యూ కెన్ సే ఇట్ యాజ్ what you call core cabinet or kitchen cabinet. Right, so this concept of kitchen cabinet it got started with Indira Gandhi. So Indira Gandhi never trusted anyone. ఇందిరాగాంధీకి ఎవరి మీద నమ్మకం ఉండేది కాదు. అందుకనే తనకంటూ ఒక 4-5 మెంబర్స్ పెట్టుకొని మొత్తం డెసిషన్ మేకింగ్ అంతా ఆ 4-5 మీదనే డిపెండ్ అయ్యేది. రైట్, సో ఇందిరాగాంధీ స్టైల్ ఆఫ్ వర్కింగ్ అంతే ఉండేది, రాజీవ్ గాంధీ స్టైల్ ఆఫ్ వర్కింగ్ అంతే ఉండేది. రైట్, అటల్ బిహారీ వాజ్పేయి అంతే, ఇప్పుడు నరేంద్ర మోడీ. రైట్, వీళ్ళు అంటే ఇందిరాగాంధీ, దెన్ రాజీవ్ గాంధీ, దెన్ వాజ్పేయి, దెన్ నరేంద్ర మోడీ. సో దీస్ ఆర్ ద ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్స్ who have used these kitchen cabinets. Alright, so in a parliamentary system of government there is another word called as shadow cabinet, so which we don't see in India lo ledu but Britain lo undi. Right, in Britain there is a concept called as shadow cabinet. Shadow cabinet means the cabinet formed by opposition parties. The cabinet formed by opposition party. That means for each and every member in the ruling party, for each and every member in the ruling cabinet, there will be opposite members in the opposition party. If there is a home minister in ruling cabinet, there will be opposition member in the who is given this responsibility of home affairs. It means for each and every member in the cabinet, there will be opposite member in the opposition party, and that cabinet of opposition party is called as shadow cabinet. So what happens when this opposition party comes to power? Automatically it is these shadow cabinet members, they will take the responsibility. So this is a kind of system that is present in Britain but not in India. So India lo ilanti paddhati ledu, right? India lo opposition parties cabinet form chese paristhiti ledu. అసలు ఇండియాలో అపోజిషన్ పార్టీస్ ఉన్నాయా? Do really we have opposition parties in India? Alright, so constitutionally speaking, we don't have a recognized opposition. Constitutionally speaking, we don't have any recognized opposition. There is no recognized opposition in India. Alright, అది చెప్తాను ఇప్పుడు చెప్పాను. So what is a recognized opposition party? I'll discuss this when I teach parliament. Alright, so these are the different types. Alright, council of ministers, cabinet ministers, and what you call kitchen cabinet. The entire council of ministers. Alright, if you take this categorization of cabinet, so we have cabinet, minister of state, and minister of states with independent charge. Alright, so already I have explained this what you call division. Already I have explained this division in the previous class. That is when I taught emergency provisions. When I taught emergency provisions, right, I have clearly discussed these divisions. Malli cheppanu, I don't want to waste my time. Alright, so ఆ రోజు క్లాస్కి ఎవరు రాలేదు, ఇద్దరే వచ్చారు క్లాస్కి. Alright, so these are different categories of ministers that we see. Alright, and it is the prime minister. It is the prime minister, right, who will assign work among all these members. So these cabinets are assisted by cabinet committee. The cabinet is assisted by cabinet committees. Alright, so we have cabinet and we have cabinet committees. The entire work of union government, actually the entire work of union government, they are done by these cabinet committees. Right, so and every year coming to UPSC for last 10 years, for nearly 4 to 5 times question came on cabinet committees. Ante prati alternate year lo you can see a question on these cabinet committees. So out of all the cabinet committees, the most powerful and important cabinet committee is cabinet committee on political affairs, which is chaired by prime minister. Right, so it is cabinet committee on political affairs which is chaired by prime minister. Alright, so this is one. So we have cabinet committee on defense, cabinet committee on what you call economic affairs. Alright, so we have different cabinet committees, but out of all the cabinet committees, the most important cabinet committee is cabinet committee on political affairs, which is chaired by prime minister. So prime minister is a chairperson. Prime minister is the chairperson of cabinet committee on political affairs. Alright, so these cabinets are assisted by cabinet committees. Right, and the cabinet will take the final decisions. Right, so final decisions are taken by cabinet. Alright, so final decisions normally, alright, most of the decisions are taken in the cabinet committees. Right, most of the decisions are taken at the level of cabinet committees. So those issues which are not resolved, or those issues which are creating conflicts among the ministries, right, the conflicting issues among the ministries, they are discussed in cabinet. So వాస్తవానికి అయితే ప్రతి ఒక్క డెసిషన్, ఆల్మోస్ట్ ప్రతి డెసిషన్స్ కూడా క్యాబినెట్ కమిటీస్ లెవెల్లో అయిపోతుంది. ఇక్కడే డెసిషన్స్ అన్నీ తీసేసుకుంటాం. ఇక్కడ తీసుకున్న డెసిషన్స్ సింపుల్గా క్యాబినెట్లో ఆమోదించడం, రైట్ రైట్. కానీ ఏవైతే కాన్ఫ్లిక్టింగ్ ఇష్యూస్ ఉంటాయో వాటిని మాత్రమే క్యాబినెట్లో డిస్కస్ చేయడం జరుగుతుంది. క్యాబినెట్లో అన్ని డిసిషన్స్ డిస్కస్ చేయరు. ఏవైతే క్యాబినెట్ కమిటీ లెవెల్లో రైట్ రిజాల్వ్ కావో, ఏవైతే క్యాబినెట్ కమిటీ లెవెల్లో పెండింగ్లో ఉంటాయో ఆ ఇష్యూస్ మాత్రమే క్యాబినెట్లో డిస్కస్ చేయడం జరుగుతుంది. సో మోస్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద ఇష్యూస్ ఆర్ డిస్కస్డ్ ఎట్ ది level of cabinet committee, right? And in case if there is any kind of pending issues or any kind of what you call conflicting issues, such issues are discussed in cabinet, right? So always make a difference between cabinet and cabinet committee. In cabinet we only see the members of cabinet, but coming to cabinet committees also includes not only the members of cabinet. If you take cabinet committees, these cabinet committees consist of 2 to 3 cabinet ministers, 2 to 3 cabinet ministers, and it consists of all the minister of states of that concerned ministries, right? So normally a cabinet committee represents 4 to 5 ministries, all right? Normally cabinet committee deals with the issues of 4 to 5 ministries. అంటే ఒక క్యాబినెట్ కమిటీ కింద 4 నుంచి 5 మినిస్ట్రీస్ ఉంటాయి, రైట్? సో ఆ మినిస్ట్రీస్కి సంబంధించిన క్యాబినెట్ మినిస్టర్స్, ఆ మినిస్ట్రీస్కి సంబంధించిన మినిస్టర్ ఆఫ్ స్టేట్స్ విత్ ఇండిపెండెంట్ జడ్జ్ అందరూ కూడా ఈ క్యాబినెట్ కమిటీలో మెంబర్సే, రైట్? సో గుర్తుపెట్టుకోండి కాంపోజిషన్ ఆఫ్ క్యాబినెట్ కమిటీ, రైట్? So if you take this cabinet committee, so this cabinet committee consists of right 2 to 3 cabinet ministers who represents that 4 to 5 ministries. It consists of a minister of all the minister of states of that ministries or departments. At the same time, it also includes secretaries of that ministries and departments. It also includes secretaries of that ministries and departments, right? So this is the what you call composition of cabinet committee. So most of the decisions are taken in the cabinet committee, and unresolved issues in the cabinet committee, they are being sent to cabinet, and the cabinet will take the final decisions. Am I clear about the working of cabinet and cabinet committees? So Prime Minister takes responsibility. Prime Minister has a responsibility of taking the final decisions in the cabinet, right? So this is how the Prime Minister works. Right? And the entire government works. So Prime Minister, with respect to government, he will determine the goals, objectives, agenda, division of work among the ministers, right? Coordinating the works of different ministries, all right? So this is with respect to government. Now coming to, all right, with respect to ministries and departments, is there any specific ministry or ministries which are placed under Prime Minister? Is there any specific ministries or ministry or ministries which are placed under Prime Minister? మీరే చెప్పాలి, నేను చెప్పాను ఆన్సర్ దీనికి. I want you to give the answer. Is there any specific ministries or which are placed under Prime Minister? What about responses? I am not getting response. అసలు ఉన్నాయా లేవా? ఉంటే ఆ మినిస్ట్రీస్ ఏంటివి చెప్పండి. Do UPSC functions under any ministry? You are writing UPSC exam. Do UPSC functions under any ministry? Or what is that ministry under which UPSC functions? What is that ministry in which UPSC functions? ఏ మినిస్ట్రీ కింద యూపీఎస్సీ ఫంక్షన్ అవుతుంది? ఇట్ ఈస్ అండర్ ది మినిస్ట్రీ ఆఫ్ పర్సనల్, రైట్? సో ఇఫ్ యు టేక్ దిస్ యూపీఎస్సీ, రైట్, యూపీఎస్సీ ఫంక్షన్స్ అండర్ మినిస్ట్రీ ఆఫ్ పర్సనల్, రైట్? సో వీ హ్యావ్ ఎ మినిస్ట్రీ కాల్డ్ యాజ్ Ministry of Personal, Public Grievances and Administrative Reforms. So this is the full description of ministry. Right? So Ministry of Personal, Public Grievances and administrative reforms. This Ministry of Personnel is headed by Prime Minister. This Ministry of Personnel is headed by Prime Minister, right? So normally, right, Ministry of Personnel is headed by Prime Minister. But right, if you take first ARC or you take second ARC, particularly first ARC, the first Administrative Reforms Commission. If you take this first Administrative Reforms Commission, which is headed by Morarji Desai, alright. So it is Morarji Desai who was the chairperson of first Administrative Reforms Commission. So this first ARC recommended that Prime Minister should not hold any ministry. It recommended that the Prime Minister should not hold any ministry. So without holding any ministry, Prime Minister should lead the government. ఇది ఫస్ట్ ఏఆర్సీ ఇచ్చిన రికమెండేషను. అంటే ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్ అన్న వాళ్ళు ఏ మినిస్ట్రీని డైరెక్ట్గా హోల్డ్ చేయకూడదు, ఎందుకంటే ఇట్ ఈస్ అన్ అన్నెసరీ బర్డెన్, రైట్. సో వితౌట్ హెడ్డింగ్ ఎనీ మినిస్ట్రీ, రైట్, ది ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్ should run the government, should act as the head of the government. This was the recommendation made by first ARC. This is the recommendation of first ARC. But of course, this recommendation is not implemented. Even today, the Ministry of Personnel, is headed by Prime Minister, right? So as the head of Ministry of Personnel, the Prime Minister is in charge of all the activities of that ministry, right? This is one function, right? We have seen this. Now coming to President, the role of Prime Minister with respect to President of India. So what is the role of Prime Minister with respect to President of India? In fact, the entire office of President is dependent on the advice given by Prime Minister. The entire office of President is dependent on Prime Minister. That is, right. If you take this President shall act only on the aid and advice of Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister. That is what Article 74 says. Without the advice of Prime Minister, the President cannot work. Similarly, according to Article 78, right, it is the duty of Prime Minister to provide all the necessary information. So, providing of necessary information, it is the duty of Prime Minister. To provide all the necessary information to the President of India, providing of all necessary information to President of India whenever required on any matter. So these are the constitutional obligation with respect to President. So providing of information, right? We have seen with respect to Parliament. Now coming to with respect to Parliament, particularly summoning and proroguing, they will take place. Particularly summoning, it will take place only on the advice of Prime Minister. It is the Prime Minister who will advise the President of India to summon the House. What is the condition for proroguing the House? Is there any precondition for proroguing of Parliament? What is the condition for prorogue? What is the condition for prorogue? What is the condition for prorogue? I have discussed this earlier. Please, మీరు గుర్తు తెచ్చుకొని చెప్పండి. అప్పటిదాకా నేను చెప్పాను. What is the precondition for proroguing? రామకృష్ణ, శశిధర్, ధరణి, వీళ్ళంతా ఎక్కడ పోయిన్లు? ఆన్సర్స్ ఏవి? నీలవేణి రెగ్యులర్గా వచ్చేవాళ్ళు క్లాస్కి. Signed die adjournment. It is adjournment signed die. It is adjournment sine, which is a precondition. Adjournment sine is a precondition for what do you call proroguing the house. Adjournment sine is a precondition. It is a precondition for prorogue of the house. All right. Am I clear? All right. So, proroguing is done on the adjournment made by speaker, whereas summoning is done by president on the advice of prime minister. And another role of what you call prime minister is, if you take prime minister is a member of business advisory committee of the house in which he is a member. So, prime minister acts as leader of the house. At the same time, he is also a member of business advisory committee, BAC. So business, so both the houses. So Lok Sabha has its own business advisory committee, and Rajya Sabha has its own business advisory committee. So there are business advisory committees for both Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha. All right, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. All right. All right. So in case of Lok Sabha, it is speaker who is the chairperson of BSc. In case of Rajya Sabha, it is the chairperson of Rajya Sabha who is the chairperson of BSc. So the prime minister is the leader of the house and the leader of opposition. Right? Right? So, prime minister is the leader of the house to which he belongs to. Not only he is the leader of the house, he is also the member of business advisory committee. So if you take this business advisory committee, the role of business advisory committee is to determine the business of that session. Alright. So before starting of the session, the entire business, that is the debates, the discussions, the bills to be passed, so everything will be discussed before starting of the session. And this what you call discussion, this meeting will be chaired by speaker or chairperson. అంటే సెషన్ స్టార్ట్ కాకముందే ఒక 2 days మీటింగ్స్ జరుగుతాయి. రైట్, దాన్ని మనము బిజినెస్ అడ్వైజరీ కమిటీ మీటింగ్స్ అంటాం. రైట్. సో అంటే ద పర్పస్ ఆఫ్ ద మీటింగ్ ఏంటిదంటే ఆ సెషన్లో ఏ బిల్స్ పాస్ చేయాలి. బేసికలీ ఇట్ రిక్వైర్స్ కోఆపరేషన్ ఆఫ్ బోత్ రూలింగ్ పార్టీ యాజ్ వెల్ యాజ్ అపోజిషన్ పార్టీ. ద పర్పస్ ఆఫ్ దట్ వాట్ యు కాల్ meeting is to ensure cooperation of all the political parties and all the members. Alright. So here the leader of the house has a major role in ensuring smoother functioning of house. Right. Smooth functioning of house law. Alright. Leader of the house, that is prime minister, has a major role. Right. So that is the role of prime minister with respect to parliament. So he has a special responsibility. Prime minister has a special responsibility of ensuring smoother working of house, right, smoother passing of the bills, right. So this is the role of prime minister with respect to parliament, right. Coming to extra constitutional bodies, right. Say for example Niti Aayog, right. Niti Aayog is an extra constitutional body. So who is the chairperson of Niti Aayog? Who is the chairperson of Niti Aayog? If you take this Niti Aayog, right, it is prime minister. So before Niti Aayog, we used to have Planning Commission and National Development Council, right, Planning Commission and National Development Council. Even prime minister acted as, so now it is Niti Aayog and previously it is Planning Commission and National Development Council. So prime minister is the ex officio chairperson. Prime minister is the ex officio chairperson of this Niti Aayog, Planning Commission and NDC. Not only these extra constitutional bodies, right. So prime minister is also, right, say for example we have National Ganga Conservation Authority, which is again headed by prime minister. So prime minister is the ex officio chairperson of National Ganga Conservation Authority. So it is these kind of organizations, which are led by prime minister, right. And coming to interstate council, article 263 of Indian Constitution, article 263 of Indian Constitution that deals with the interstate council. So these interstate councils are also chaired by Prime Minister. So these are different institutions which are placed under Prime Minister. Alright. So the purpose of this interstate council is to ensure cooperation between the states. It is to ensure cooperation between the states. Alright. So this is what are different institutions that are placed under Prime Minister. Alright. So Prime Minister has a role with respect to these institutions. Alright. So before leaving the class, I want to say one thing about me. So yesterday, one girl who has called us, right, she has asked about one thing about me. Asalu Amarnath sir civils rashinani, she has never seen my videos, it seems. Right, without seeing the videos, right, without listening to my lectures, she has called and she has raised a doubt about my credentials. Right. So before talking about me, right, do you like the lectures, the kind of teaching that I am having? The kind of lectures that I am giving. Do you like these lectures? Whether my class is understandable to you? నేను చెప్పే క్లాస్ మీకు అర్థమవుతుందా? నేను చెప్పే క్లాస్ మీకు అర్థమవుతుందా? Because I want everyone to respond. It is not one or two. Alright. So just okay, 5 minutes, last end of 5 minutes, because you should know about me. Alright. Because అందుకే నేను ఒకటి ఎప్పుడు చెప్తా ఉంటా, సివిల్స్ టీచ్ చేసే వాళ్ళు ఎవరైనా సరే వాళ్ళ క్రెడెన్షియల్స్ అన్నీ డిస్ప్లే చేయాలి. వాళ్ళ క్రెడెన్షియల్స్ అన్నీ ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్లో డిస్ప్లే చేయాలి, వాళ్ళకున్న హాల్ టికెట్స్. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ నేను క్వాలిఫై అయినట్టు ఆధారం ఏంటిది, ప్రూఫ్ ఏంటిది? యూపీఎస్సీ ఏదో పంపించి ఉంటుంది కదా. సో ఐ వాంట్ దిస్. ఇది ఫస్ట్ నేను చెప్పే పాయింట్. డోంట్ బ్లైండ్లీ బిలీవ్ ఎవ్రీ వన్. చాలామంది క్వాలిఫై కాకుండానే దే ఆర్ టీచింగ్. రైట్. సో ఐఎమ్ లీస్ట్ బాదర్ అబౌట్ దట్. సో మై జర్నీ గాట్ స్టార్టెడ్ ఇన్ 2005. From 2005 to 2010 I gave all the attempts and I cleared all the prelims exam. నేను ఎప్పుడు కూడా ప్రిలిమ్స్ డిస్క్వాలిఫై కాలేదు. ఎవ్రీ టైమ్ I gave all attempts from 2005 to 2010. I am from OBC category. నాది OBC category. మా అప్పుడు 7 attempts. I gave 7 attempts. I cleared all the 7 attempts. Right from first attempt I went on clearing civils. At the age of 21 years, I gave my first prelims attempt. I cleared it. నేను ఫస్ట్ ప్రిలిమ్స్ క్వాలిఫై అయినప్పుడు నా ఏజ్ 21 years. నాకు 25 years వచ్చేలోపు I gave 4 attempts. And that 4 attempts I went to interview. నా టార్గెట్ అదే, 25 లోపు నేను సర్వీస్ కొట్టాలని. నేను చేసిన తప్పని ఏంటంటే ఎక్కడ కోచింగ్ తీసుకోలేదు. అది చేసిన పెద్ద బ్లండర్ మిస్టేక్ అది. ఐ నో హౌ టు వర్క్. కష్టపడే తత్వం నా దగ్గర ఉంది, బాగా కష్టపడతా. కానీ నాకు రైట్ గైడెన్స్ లేదు. అంటే నాకు తెలియదు ఎలా ప్రిపేర్ కావాలని. నాకు తెలిసిన దానిలో ఒకటే, ఈ బుక్ చదివితే ర్యాంక్ వస్తుందంటే చాలు, ఆ బుక్ చదివేటోళ్ళని. అదే నేను చేసిన పని. ఐ రెడ్ ఆల్ ద ఎన్సీఆర్టీస్ పట్టుకొని హిస్టరీ, జాగ్రఫీ మొత్తం చదవడం కాదు, మొత్తం నోట్స్ రాసుకున్నా. సొంతంగా చదివి సొంతంగా నోట్స్ రాసుకున్నా. పబ్బాడ్ బుక్ 2 పుస్తకాలు తీసుకున్నా. అందులో లక్ష్మీకాంత్ పబ్లిక్ అడ్మిన్ బుక్ మాత్రం ఒక 100 సార్లు చదివినవచ్చు. ప్రతి లైన్, ప్రతి వర్డ్ నా బ్రెయిన్లో ఉంటుంది. రైట్. సో అంత విపరీతంగా చదివిన. నాకు తెలియదు, చదవడం ఒక్కటే తెలుసు నాకు. చదివిన అండ్ రిజల్ట్ ఈస్, నేను ఫస్ట్ టైం 2 ఎగ్జామ్స్ రాసిన. ఒకటి గ్రూప్ 1 ప్రిలిమ్స్ అండ్ సివిల్స్ ప్రిలిమ్స్. దీనికి 2 months గ్యాప్. మార్చ్లో గ్రూప్ 1 ఎగ్జామ్ జరిగింది, మేలో సివిల్స్ ఎగ్జామ్ జరిగింది. నేను 2 ఎగ్జామ్స్ క్వాలిఫై అయినా. మై ఫాదర్ వాంట్ మీ టు రైట్ గ్రూప్ 1 ఎగ్జామ్. నాకేమో సివిల్స్ ఇంట్రెస్ట్. గ్రూప్ 1 ఎప్పుడు నాకు ఇష్టం ఉండేది కాదు. రైట్. సో 2008లో ఫస్ట్ టైం ఇంటర్వ్యూకి వెళ్ళినా నేను. అంటే ఇన్ మై 4th attempt. ఫస్ట్ 3 మెయిన్స్లో నేను ఇంటర్వ్యూకి వెళ్ళలేదు. ఐ గాట్ మై ఫస్ట్ ఇంటర్వ్యూ కాల్ ఇన్ 2008. ఇందులో రైట్ ఐ లాస్ట్ సర్వీస్ ఓన్లీ బై 2 marks. ఇది నా రూమ్మేట్స్కి, నా ఫ్రెండ్స్కి తప్పించి ప్రపంచానికి ఎవరు తెలియదు. నాతో పాటు ప్రిపేర్ నా రూమ్మేట్స్ అండ్ మై క్లోజ్ ఫ్రెండ్స్, అంటే నాతో పాటు ఉన్న వాళ్ళు. అండ్ ఆల్ మై రూమ్మేట్స్ ఆర్ ఇన్ సర్వీస్. ఐ లాస్ట్ సర్వీస్ ఓన్లీ బై 2 మార్క్స్. అది జిఎస్లో బాగా దెబ్బ కొట్టింది నాకు. జిఎస్లో నేను అసలు ఎక్స్పెక్ట్ చేయని మార్క్స్. నాకు ఎప్పుడు 260 270 వచ్చేవి అవుట్ ఆఫ్ 600. కానీ ఆ ఇయర్లో 164 వచ్చినాయి 4th అటెంప్ట్లో. నాకు 250 మార్క్స్ వచ్చినా కానీ నా ర్యాంక్ 100 లోపు ఉండేది. బికాస్ మై మార్క్స్ ఇన్ ఆప్షన్స్ ఆర్ ఎక్స్ట్రాడినరీ మార్క్స్ నావి. పబ్బాడ్ 372, సైకాలజీ 328, రైట్, ఎస్ఏ 117, ఇంటర్వ్యూ 156. నాకు బాగా హర్ట్ అయిన విషయం, నాకు బాగా సెట్ బ్యాక్ అయింది జిఎస్లో 164. అందులో ఇంకొక 50 మార్క్స్ ఎక్కువ వచ్చినా నాకు ర్యాంక్ వచ్చేది అట్లీస్ట్ 100 ర్యాంక్ మధ్యలో వచ్చేది నా ర్యాంక్. రైట్. సో రైట్, ఇది 2010లో మళ్ళీ ఇంటర్వ్యూకి వెళ్ళినా. బట్ 2010లో అది డిజాస్టర్ నాది. సైకాలజీని విపరీతంగా తొక్కుపడేశాడు. సైకాలజీ, పబ్లిక్ అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్, డౌన్ఫాల్ ఆఫ్ పబ్లిక్ అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్, సైకాలజీ స్టార్టెడ్ ఫ్రమ్ వాట్ యు కాల్ 2010. అక్కడి నుంచి ఇక పబ్లిక్ అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్ కోలుకోలేదు. రైట్. సో నా టీచింగ్ ఆఫ్టర్ మై 4th attempt ఐ స్టార్టెడ్ ఫస్ట్ టైం టీచింగ్ ఫర్ యూపీఎస్సీ ఆస్పిరెంట్స్ ఆఫ్టర్ మై 4th attempt. 4th attempt తర్వాత ఐ స్టార్ట్ టీచింగ్ ఫర్ యూపీఎస్సీ ఆస్పిరెంట్స్. రైట్. అంటే నా టీచింగ్ కెరీర్ అన్నది, నా టీచింగ్ హ్యాబిట్ అనేది 2008లో స్టార్ట్ అయింది యూపీఎస్సీలో. రైట్. సో తర్వాత 2009లో నాకు ఎందుకో జాబ్ ఇన్సెక్యూరిటీ అనిపించి సివిల్స్ అంటే 2008 మెయిన్స్ అయిపోయిన తర్వాత ఐ హ్యావ్ ట్రైనింగ్ ఫర్ ఎస్ఏపీ SAP. ఐఎమ్ బీటెక్ కెమికల్ ఇంజనీరింగ్ గ్రాడ్యుయేట్. నేను ఎస్ఏపీలో ట్రైనింగ్ తీసుకున్నా. రైట్. ఐబిఎంలో సంహౌ ప్లేస్ అయిపోయినా, ఏదో ఒక దారిలో ప్లేస్ అయిపోయినా. కానీ నాకు భయం ఉండేది, బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్ వెరిఫికేషన్లో దొరికిపోతున్న భయంతో రిజైన్ చేసేసిన జాబ్ని. రైట్. ఎందుకంటే నాకు స్టిల్ హ్యావ్ అటెంప్ట్స్. రైట్. దట్ ఈస్ వాట్ 2011 ఫస్ట్ టైం ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్ పెట్టిన నేను. 2011లో ఫస్ట్ టైం ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్ పెట్టిన. రైట్. సో దాని పేరు ర్యాంకర్స్ అకాడమీ. అప్పుడు ఇంక ఇవన్నీ లేవు, ఏ ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్ లేదు, సిఎస్బీలు గిఎస్బీలు ఏం లేవు ఇక్కడ. 2011లో ఫస్ట్ టైం ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్ పెట్టిన. కాన్ఫిడెన్స్ లేదు, స్టూడెంట్స్ వచ్చేవాళ్ళు కాదు. గ్రూప్ 2 పెట్టినాం ఫస్ట్. సివిల్స్ గ్రూప్ 1, గ్రూప్ 2. ఎక్కువ గ్రూప్ 2 వాళ్ళు వచ్చిండు. రైట్. 2012లో ఐ గాట్ జాబ్. ఇది కాదు అనుకొని మళ్ళీ ఏపీఎస్సీ రాసిన. అప్పుడు ఇక్కడ తెలంగాణ లేదు. ఏపీఎస్సీ ఎగ్జామ్ రాసిన. ఐ గాట్ సెలెక్టెడ్ యాజ్ AEE ఇన్ ఇరిగేషన్ డిపార్ట్మెంట్. సో 2012 నుంచి 2016 వరకు ఐ వర్క్డ్ యాజ్ AEE. బట్ ఐ నెవర్ స్టాప్ టీచింగ్. నేను ఎక్కడ పోస్టింగ్ అయినా సరే ఐ యూస్ టు ఎస్టాబ్లిష్ ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్. ఐ యూస్ టు టీచ్ ఫ్రీలీ ఫర్ యూపీఎస్సీ ఆస్పిరెంట్స్. నేను ఎక్కడ పనిచేసినా టీచింగ్ మాత్రం ఆపుకుని ఉంటుంది కాదు. 5 o'clock దాటిందంటే ఐ యూస్ టు గో టు క్లాస్. అందులో నన్ను ప్రపంచంలో ఎవడు ఆగిపోయినా నేను ఆగేటోని కాదు. రైట్. అది. సో 2016లో నారాయణ ఐఏఎస్ అకాడమీ వాళ్ళు దే గేవ్ ఎ ప్లాట్ఫామ్ ఫర్ మీ టు టేక్ వీకెండ్ క్లాసెస్ ఫర్ యూపీఎస్సీ ఆస్పిరెంట్స్. సో వీకెండ్స్ వచ్చి ఐ యూస్ టు టీచ్ ఇన్ నారాయణ ఐఏఎస్ అకాడమీ. సో ఒక 3 months చేసిన తర్వాత ఐ టుక్ అ లాంగ్ లీవ్. 2016లో లాంగ్ లీవ్ పెట్టి ఐ జాయిన్డ్ ఇన్ నారాయణ ఐఏఎస్ అకాడమీ వేర్ మై పే, అప్పుడే నా పే హైయెస్ట్ అక్కడ అందరికంటే. రైట్. సో ఐ వర్క్ అప్ టు 2019. కోవిడ్లో ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్ క్లోజ్ అయ్యేంత వరకు నేను ఇలా పనిచేస్తున్నాను. అండ్ ఐఎమ్ ద మెయిన్ ఫ్యాకల్టీ ఆఫ్ నారాయణ ఐఏఎస్ అకాడమీ. అందులో కండిషన్ ఏంటంటే అక్కడ తప్పించి నేను ఎక్కడ చెప్పకూడదు, వాళ్ళ దగ్గర తప్పించి ఇక్కడ చెప్పకూడదు. అందుకే నేను వేరే ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్ ఎక్కడ నా పేరు కనపడదు. 2019 తర్వాత యు నో వాట్ హ్యాపెండ్, లాక్డౌన్. రైట్. నో ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్స్, నో కోచింగ్ క్లాసెస్. మళ్ళీ ఐ టుక్ క్లాసెస్ ఇన్ మై హౌస్. కాకతీయ ఐఏఎస్ అకాడమీ అనేది అప్పుడే పెట్టినా నేను. 2020లో పెట్టిన. అది మా ఇంటి నుంచి పెట్టిన నేను. అందుకనే మీకు లొకేషన్, మీకు గాంధీనగర్ లొకేషన్ ఇట్ విల్ షో ది ప్రీవియస్ లొకేషన్. మీకు 2 లొకేషన్ చూపిస్తుంది. ఒకటి నా పాత ఇల్లుది, ఒకటి ఇప్పుడున్న లొకేషన్ది. రైట్. సో ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్ పెట్టిన సెకండ్ ఫేజ్ అంటే 2020 అక్టోబర్లో ఐ లాంచ్ అగైన్. ఐ టుక్ అ బిల్డింగ్ అగైన్ ఐ స్టార్టెడ్. ప్రాబ్లం ఏంటిదంటే నాతో పాటు నా క్లాస్లో 8 మంది స్టూడెంట్స్కి కోవిడ్ అటాక్ అయింది. అగైన్ ఐ బీన్ ఫోర్స్ టు క్లోజ్ ద ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్. దెన్ ఐ వెంట్ అండ్ జాయిన్ ఇన్ శరత్ చంద్ర ఐఏఎస్ అకాడమీ యాజ్ అన్ అకాడమిక్ డైరెక్టర్. మీకు ఇప్పుడు కూడా తెలిసి ఉంటుంది శరత్ చంద్ర ఐఏఎస్ అకాడమీ ఇంటిగ్రేటెడ్ ప్రోగ్రామ్ విజయవాడలో ఉంటుంది, హైదరాబాద్లో కూడా ఉంది. 2023 అక్టోబర్ వరకు అందులో పనిచేసిన. 23 తర్వాత నేను రిజైన్ చేసిన. ఎందుకంటే ఐవ్ సీన్ నారాయణ చూసిన, తర్వాత అక్కడ చూసిన. ఈవెన్ ఐ యూస్ టు టీచ్ ఇన్ విజేత ఐఏఎస్ అకాడమీ, విజేత ఐఏఎస్ ఇన్ ఢిల్లీ, రైట్, కిషోర్ దగ్గర, రైట్. అందులో కూడా ఐ యూస్ టు టీచ్, ఐ టాట్ ఇన్ అన్ అకాడమీ. అన్ అకాడమీ అయితే వర్స్ట్ ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్, నాకు నచ్చదు అన్ అకాడమీది. ఒక పనికిరాని ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్ అది అన్ అకాడమీ అన్నది. ఒక 1 month ఏమో చెప్పినా నాకు నచ్చలేదు. నాకు ఎందుకంటే నచ్చని దగ్గర నేను ఉండలేను బేసికల్గా. సో ఐ కేమ్ బ్యాక్, రైట్. ఇవన్నీ చూసినాక నాకు అనిపించింది ఏంటంటే ప్రతి ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్కి కావాల్సింది డబ్బులే. ఏ ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్, ఎందుకంటే నేను చూసిన వేల మంది స్టూడెంట్స్ వస్తారు. నేను లాస్ట్ పనిచేసిన ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్లో ఎవ్రీ ఇయర్ దెర్ ఈజ్ అ ఫ్రెష్ ఇంటేక్ ఆఫ్ 300 to 400 స్టూడెంట్స్. ఒక్కొక్క స్టూడెంట్ దే షుడ్ పే 1,80,000 ఫీజు. కానీ ఒక ఎగ్జామ్ పెట్టరు, ఒక నోట్స్ ఇవ్వరు. ఏంటంటే క్లాసులు మాత్రమే జరుగుతాయి, బట్ నో రియల్ గైడెన్స్ ఫర్ యూపీఎస్సీ. నాకు కంప్లీట్గా ఫ్రస్ట్రేట్ అయిపోయినా. సో అందుకనే నేను ఏ ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్లో జాయిన్ కాలేదు. ఆఫ్టర్ October 2023 I have never joined any institution. I had my own online classes every day. అప్పటి నుంచి నేను కాకతీయ అకాడమీ స్టార్ట్ చేసేంత వరకు కూడా టీచింగ్ ఆపలేదు. ఐ హ్యాడ్ మై ఓన్ స్టూడెంట్స్. ఈవెన్ ఇప్పుడు కూడా ఫ్రమ్ 6:30 to 8:30 దెర్ ఈజ్ అ సపరేట్ బ్యాచ్ ఫర్ ఎంప్లాయీస్. ఆ బ్యాచ్లో ఓన్లీ ఎంప్లాయీస్ మాత్రమే ఉంటారు. అది ఆన్లైన్లో జరుగుతుంది క్లాసు. సో నేను ఫ్రీ ఇనిషియేటివ్ తీసుకోవడానికి కారణం అదే, రైట్. ద వన్ హూ ఈజ్ రియల్లీ ప్రిపేరింగ్ ఫర్ యూపీఎస్సీ, వాళ్ళకి మాత్రమే మై హోల్ హార్టెడ్ సపోర్ట్. బికాస్ లక్షలు కట్టి మోసపోయే బదులు ఫస్ట్ నేర్చుకోండి, తర్వాత దెన్ థింక్ అబౌట్ జాయినింగ్ సమ్ ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్. బేసిక్స్ ఏం లేకుండా డబ్బులు ఖర్చు పెట్టి బాధపడి, రైట్, ఇవన్నీ ఐ డోంట్ లైక్ ఇట్, రైట్. అండ్ అలానని చెప్పి ఐ కెనాట్ సాక్రిఫైస్ మై సెల్ఫ్. దట్ ఈస్ ద రీజన్ వై ఐఎమ్ ఛార్జింగ్ ఆప్షనల్ సబ్జెక్ట్స్. ఎక్కడో దగ్గర డబ్బులు తీసుకోవాలి నేను, లేకపోతే నేను ఐ కెనాట్ సస్టైన్, బ్రతకలేను నేను. ఎక్కడో దగ్గర డబ్బులు తీసుకోవాలి. ఒకటి ఫ్రీ ఇస్తే ఒక దగ్గర డబ్బులు తీసుకుంటారు. ఐఎమ్ నాట్ గాడ్, రైట్. సో పీపుల్ షుడ్ నో దిస్ అబౌట్ మీ, రైట్. సో రైట్, ఓకేనా. సో దిస్ ఈజ్ వాట్ మై జర్నీ ఇన్ యూపీఎస్సీ యాజ్ వెల్ యాజ్ ఇన్ వాట్ యు కాల్ టీచింగ్ ఫీల్డ్, రైట్. ఇంతకుముందు చెప్పిన మెంటర్షిప్ అనేది నా ఛాలెంజింగ్ బ్యాచ్ అది. ఎందుకంటే నా డ్రీమ్ అది, రైట్. నాకు 2 మార్కులతో సర్వీస్ మిస్ అయినప్పుడు ఆ బాధ నా ఒక్కనికే తెలుస్తుంది, ఇంకెవ్వరికి తెలియదు ఆ బాధ, రైట్. మన ఫ్రెండ్స్, మన రూమ్మేట్స్ అందరూ సర్వీసులు కొట్టి వాళ్ళు టీవీలలో ఇంటర్వ్యూస్ ఇవ్వడము, పేపర్లలో ఫొటోస్ ఇవ్వడము, పేపర్లో ఇంటర్వ్యూస్ ఇవ్వడము, వాళ్ళు మంచి పొజిషన్లో ఉన్నప్పుడు మనకు ఆ పొజిషన్లో లేనప్పుడు ఆ పెయిన్, ఆ ఫ్రస్ట్రేషను ఓన్లీ ఐ కెన్ అండర్స్టాండ్. 20 సంవత్సరాల నుంచి ఎన్ని జాబ్లు వచ్చినా అన్నీ వదిలేసుకొని 2021లో ఐ హ్యావ్ రిజైన్ మై జాబ్ ఇన్ 2021. నాకు నచ్చలేదు జాబ్, ఎందుకంటే నా మైండ్ అంతా ఇక్కడే ఉంది, స్కిల్స్ మీదే ఉంది, రైట్. సో బికాస్ ఐ హ్యావ్ మై ఓన్ డ్రీమ్స్. నా డ్రీమ్ ఏంటంటే నా దగ్గర ఉన్న ప్రతి స్టూడెంట్ సివిల్స్ కొట్టాలి. అందుకని ఆ మెంటర్షిప్ బ్యాచ్లో 30 మెంబర్స్, ఆ 30 మెంబర్స్లో టార్గెట్ ఈస్ టు మేక్ అట్లీస్ట్ 10 మెంబర్స్ టు క్రాక్ సివిల్స్. నాకు మంచి కష్టపడే వాళ్ళు కావాలి, రైట్. సో విత్ దిస్ నోట్ ఐ స్టార్ట్ ద క్లాస్ హియర్, రైట్. అండ్ విల్ మీట్ టుమారో at same time of 10 o'clock. And public admission class will be at 2:30.